Welcome back to Outsiders. I'm James Morrow, here as always with the recumbent Rowan Dean and the remonstrative Rita Panahi. Now, I want to have a chat this morning about the latest lunacy to come out of the American media and their coverage of the 2020 race, which is important because decisions made in newsrooms in New York and Washington, D.C. inevitably influence the way both the presidential race and news in general is covered here in Australia. And here I'm talking, of course, about a bizarre effort by the New York Times to reframe absolutely everything in contemporary America through the lens of slavery and racism. The New York Times calls it the 1619 Project, the idea being that the entire 400 or more year settlement history of North America has been about nothing but being a racist project from go to woe. As the New York Times' editorial board's Mara Gay put it, announcing the project on Twitter, "In the days and weeks to come, we will publish essays demonstrating that nearly everything that has made America exceptional grew out of slavery." And by exceptional, she means, of course, awful. No universal health care? Blame racism. Traffic jams? Segregation. You see where this is going. It is an intellectually dishonest project that reinterprets facts to support its conclusions. And we're asked, as readers, to assume that the colonial militiamen squaring off against a British redcoat during the Revolution or a Northern soldier enlisting to save the Union during the Civil War did so with nothing more in mind than preserving white supremacy? Come again? Look, on any fair reading of history, it was the non-slave-holding states of the industrial North whose enterprise had far more to do with making America great than the moribund slave-holding economies of the South. In any case, why does all this matter today? Well, firstly, it goes to support the narrative that is now being pushed in the wake of the collapsed Russia collusion theory. Rather than being in bed with the Ruskies, Trump is in bed with the racists. And anyone who supports him is also tarred irredeemably with the evil brush of racism. Everyone, that is, except for New York Times reporters who always tend to get a pass for their own bizarre behavior. I mean, just this week it came out that a New York Times senior political editor, Tom Wright-Pirzanti, had himself a long history of off-color tweets, yet also still seems to have a job with the newspaper of self-righteousness. Secondly, it also puts the lie to the half-hearted attempts of the left during the 2016 presidential campaign to claim that America was already great. We didn't buy their beliefs in American exceptionalism then, and we certainly won't now. Finally, though, it matters because, as I said before, much of the New York Times reporting is picked up here in Australia verbatim by local media through content sharing, thus giving Australians a distorted picture of the United States while encouraging, not that they need it, many local journos of leftist bent the excuse they need to try and run their own local versions of the 1619 Project, hoping to win a walk-leaf through their own exposés of our own racial perfidy.
This really came out in that town hall meeting the New York Times had, the crisis meeting,
yes,
the transcript of which got leaked to the media. And it really showed that they had put so much focus and resources into this Russian collusion conspiracy theory. And once that imploded, they were going to pivot to racism. They talked about it openly, that this was the next agenda setting thing they were going to do.
And that the whole item here wasn't about, trying to just report the news fairly, but it was always with the object, we've got to get Trump. That failed. We've got to find something else, some other way to bring him down.
And what's insidious about this is the misuse of this term racism is disgusting. I mean, genuine racism is to be deplored. It's revolting.
Of course.
It's got an ugly history. And there are racists out there at the moment. But the reality is there are nothing like the number of racists that the left keeps saying. And just as a point about this is that even research in the States, and I'm sure it's similar here, has shown that Democrats and left-leaning people believe that any criticism of a person of colour is by definition racist.
Unless that person of colour happens to be a conservative.
Oh, of course. Then you
in
can
which
say
case,
whatever you want.
you can say what you want. And we saw this, we talked about it earlier, with people calling out the hypocrisy of Harry and Meghan, amongst the most privileged people in the world, and straight away the race card is used. Oh, no, you're only doing this because she's partly black.
That's right.
I mean, it is
And they've
yet-
twisted it so that any criticism of the left is racist.
And yet, you know,
That's
you
the
look at-
ultimate,
Yeah.
the same
misuse of
people who
language.
use expressions, real racial slurs like Uncle Tom and worse, against people of colour who actually don't subscribe to their worldview. You know what?
Well,
quite often,
attacks on Warren Mundine, attacks
Yep.
on Jacinta Price, other people. Oh, no, that's not racist. That's because they're conservatives. I mean, it's just sick.
And it is sick because also it assumes that everybody's politics has to go along with their skin colour, which, I'm sorry, but that's as racist as anything.